A teenager is carried into a chamber cut from solid rock. His face is covered in solid gold. Around him, over 5,000 objects, enough treasure to fund an army, sealed away for what everyone in that room believed would be eternity. What none of them knew is that this boy's tomb would stay hidden for 3,245 years, untouched by human hands, while every other pharaoh's resting place was looted, robbed, and forgotten. Why him? Why did the sands protect this one king and no other? This is the true story of Tutankhamun. Not the myth, not the curse, but what archaeology, chemistry, and DNA science have actually proven happened in the Valley of the Kings around 1323 BCE. Tutankhamun became pharaoh of Egypt at approximately 9 years old, following the chaotic religious revolution of his likely father, Akhenaten, who had upended Egypt's entire belief system by banning the traditional gods and forcing worship of a single sun disk, the Aten. When Akhenaten died, Egypt was in religious and political crisis. A child was placed on the throne of the most powerful civilization on Earth. Picture that for a second. 9 years old, ruling over a kingdom stretching from the Mediterranean to Nubia, surrounded by advisors twice his age who each wanted control of the empire through him. His name at birth was likely Tutankhaten, living image of Aten. It was changed to Tutankhamun, living image of Amun, a public political statement. Egypt was reversing course, restoring the old gods, undoing his father's revolution. Modern CT scans and genetic testing conducted by Egyptian and international researchers in 2010 revealed something the ancient world never spoke of directly. Tutankhamun's body bore the marks of severe physical struggle. A clubfoot, bone necrosis in his left foot consistent with Köhler disease, evidence of malaria detected through DNA analysis, found in his tissue on multiple occasions. In his tomb, Carter's team found over 130 walking sticks and canes, some elegantly carved, others clearly used, worn down from actual daily use. This was not decoration. This was a boy who could barely walk unaided, ruling an empire that expected him to be a living god of strength and war. He died around age 19. The cause remains debated among scientists. A fall, a chariot accident, complications from malaria and a broken leg, or a combination of chronic illness that finally overwhelmed his weakened body. What is not debated is this: his death was sudden and unexpected. Egypt had no fully prepared royal tomb ready for him. That single fact changes everything you're about to learn. If you're watching this right now, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I read every single one. And if ancient history like this fascinates you, hit subscribe, because this channel exists to bring you the real, documented truth behind history's greatest mysteries. Because Tutankhamun died before a tomb worthy of a king was finished, Egyptian priests made a decision that would accidentally protect him for over 3,000 years. They buried him in a smaller tomb, likely originally built for a nobleman or official, tucked into the floor of the Valley of the Kings. Its small size and low position meant that within decades, flooding debris and the construction of later tombs, including that of Ramesses VI directly above it, literally buried the entrance under rubble and worker huts. Grave robbers who plundered nearly every other pharaoh's tomb in the valley never found it, because by the time serious tomb robbery accelerated in later centuries, Tutankhamun's tomb had already vanished beneath the desert floor. The burial itself, according to evidence found inside the tomb, was rushed. Wet paint on the walls, objects crammed into rooms in no clear order, unlike the meticulously planned tombs of longer reigning pharaohs. Furniture from his childhood was buried alongside state treasures. Whoever organized this funeral, likely his successor, the elderly official Ai, who married Tutankhamun's widow shortly after, needed him buried and sealed quickly, within the traditional 70 days required for embalming. But with none of the decades of preparation a pharaoh's tomb usually received. And then, the doors were sealed. Priests pressed the royal necropolis seal, a jackal over 9 bound captives, symbol of the god Anubis, into wet plaster across the tomb's entrance. That seal would remain unbroken for over 3,200 years. what actually happened inside the Valley of the Kings in the years that followed, how a lost boy king became the most famous pharaoh in human history, is where our story truly begins. Deir el-Medina, the village that built eternity. 2 kilometers from where Tutankhamun's tomb lay hidden, there existed a settlement most people have never heard of, yet it holds more real, documented information about daily Egyptian life than almost any other site on Earth. Deir el-Medina, the village of the tomb builders. This is not speculation. Archaeologists have excavated thousands of written records from this village, court documents, workers' complaints, even records of the world's first known labor strike. And it all connects directly to how Tutankhamun's tomb and every royal tomb in the valley was actually built. The workers of Deir el-Medina were not slaves. This is one of the most persistent myths about pyramid and tomb construction, and the documentary evidence flatly contradicts it. These were skilled paid laborers, scribes, painters, stonecutters, plasterers, organized into 2 teams, left and right, each with a foreman, working in the Valley of the Kings on a rotating schedule of 10 days on, followed by rest days aligned with the Egyptian week. Payment records survive on thousands of broken pottery shards called ostraca. Workers were paid in grain, beer, fish, vegetables, and cloth, a functioning wage economy nearly 3,300 years before modern currency. When payments were delayed under Ramesses III, decades after Tutankhamun's reign, the workers organized what historians consider the first recorded labor strike in human history, sitting down at the temple gates and refusing to work until wages were restored. The scribe Amenacht documented it himself, in his own words, preserved on papyrus. Tell me in the comments, did you know ordinary Egyptian workers had rights, wages, and even went on strike over 3,000 years ago? If this is blowing your mind, subscribe, because this is only chapter 2. So who actually built Tutankhamun's tomb, given how rushed his burial was? Records and architectural analysis suggest his tomb, KV62, was likely repurposed and expanded rapidly from an existing, smaller excavation, possibly originally intended for a private noble, not a king. This explains its uniquely compact layout, 4 small rooms, compared to the sprawling, multi-chambered tombs of pharaohs who ruled for decades and had years to plan their eternal resting place. Inside those cramped walls, the artistry did not suffer. The antechamber, annex, burial chamber, and treasury were packed with over 5,398 cataloged objects. Howard Carter's team spent nearly 10 years cataloging them all. Golden shrines nested inside one another like Russian dolls. A solid gold death mask weighing over 10 kilograms, inlaid with lapis lazuli, carnelian, and colored glass, crafted by master goldsmiths whose names history never recorded. 6 full-size chariots dismantled to fit through the narrow tomb entrance. 2 life-sized guardian statues, painted black and gold, positioned to protect the sealed burial chamber. Real documentation from the tomb also reveals something deeply human: intimacy. 2 small mummified fetuses were found inside, believed by researchers, based on DNA testing conducted in 2010, to be Tutankhamun's own stillborn daughters. His wife, Ankhesenamun, was his own half-sister, a common royal practice in Egypt intended to preserve divine bloodlines, though modern genetic analysis has confirmed it likely contributed directly to Tutankhamun's poor health, including his clubfoot and weakened immune system, since his parents were also siblings. This is where documentary evidence forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about the golden age of Egypt. The very practices meant to preserve royal purity and divine power were, biologically, destroying the health of the family meant to embody it. Letters discovered from this period, including a remarkable diplomatic letter believed to be from Ankhesenamun to the Hittite king Suppiluliuma I, reveal a desperate widowed queen, writing that she refused to marry a servant and begged for a foreign prince to marry instead, to prevent Egypt's throne from falling to a commoner. The Hittite prince sent in response was killed before reaching Egypt, a real documented diplomatic catastrophe that historians still debate today. one that reads like a political thriller written in stone and clay tablets rather than fiction. Every object, every letter, every worker's wage slip tells the same story. Tutankhamun's world was not myth. It was administered, recorded, paid, and organized by real people whose names, complaints, and lives we can still read today. Silence, sand, and the discovery that shook the world. For over 3,000 years, nothing happened. The Valley of the Kings, once alive with workers, priests, and the sound of chisels on stone, went silent. Tutankhamun's name was deliberately erased from later king lists, likely because he was associated with his father Akhenaten's rejected religious revolution. Egypt's own priests, in later centuries, tried to make him disappear from history entirely. It nearly worked. Then, on November 4th, 1922, a young Egyptian water boy working for archaeologist Howard Carter's excavation team accidentally struck a stone step buried beneath centuries of debris. Carter had been searching the Valley of the Kings for years, funded by the wealthy British aristocrat Lord George Herbert, 5th Earl of Carnarvon, who had nearly cut funding entirely after season of failure. If you're enjoying this real documentary breakdown, comment below what surprised you the most so far. And don't forget to subscribe because Chapter 4 reveals what science has finally proven about the so-called curse. Carter uncovered 16 steps leading down to a sealed doorway, stamped with the necropolis seal. He sent an urgent telegram to Lord Carnarvon in England. At last have made wonderful discovery in Valley, a magnificent tomb with seals intact. Carnarvon rushed to Egypt. On November 26, 1922, Carter made a small hole in the sealed doorway, held up a candle and peered inside. Carnarvon, standing behind him, asked if he could see anything. Carter's actual recorded words, preserved in his own excavation journal, were, "Yes, wonderful things." What he saw was a room untouched since the funeral procession over 3,000 years earlier. Golden furniture, statues, chariots, all crammed together exactly as ancient priests had left them. It remains, to this day, the most intact royal tomb ever discovered in Egypt. Then came the part the world remembers most, even though the real documented facts are far less supernatural than the legend. On April 5, 1923, Lord Carnarvon died in Cairo. The press exploded with stories of an ancient pharaoh's curse, partly fueled by sensationalist British newspapers and partly by author Marie Corelli, who publicly warned of dire punishment for disturbing the tomb just before Carnarvon's death. The real documented cause of Carnarvon's death was far more mundane. An infected mosquito bite on his cheek worsened when he cut it shaving, which led to blood poisoning and pneumonia in a man already in extremely fragile health from a serious car accident decades earlier. Medical historians who have studied his case extensively agree there is no mystery here, only tragic, ordinary infection in the era before antibiotics existed. Statistical analysis conducted decades later by researchers, including a well-known 2002 study published in the British Medical Journal, examined the actual lifespans of everyone present at the tomb's opening. Howard Carter himself, the person with by far the most direct exposure to the tomb, lived nearly 17 more years, dying in 1939 at age 64 of natural causes. The data showed no statistically significant pattern of early death among those involved. The curse was, factually, a media invention that sold newspapers. But something else, something real and far more scientifically interesting, was happening. Bacteria and mold spores, some potentially harmful, have genuinely been found sealed within ancient Egyptian tombs, and researchers have documented cases where excavators fell ill from breathing air trapped for millennia. This gave the curse legend just enough scientific plausibility to survive for a century, a real phenomenon wrapped inside a false explanation. Carter spent the next decade meticulously documenting, photographing, and removing every single item from the tomb, a process so careful and thorough that it essentially created the modern standards for archaeological excavation still used today. What we actually know today. So what do we actually definitively know about Tutankhamun based on real evidence rather than legend? We know, through genetic testing published by Dr. Zahi Hawass and an international research team in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2010, that Tutankhamun's parents were siblings and that he suffered from a genetic bone disorder alongside recurrent malaria infections documented directly in his tissue samples. We know his mother was the mummy identified only as the younger lady, found in tomb KV35, confirmed through DNA comparison to be Tutankhamun's mother and a full sibling of Akhenaten. We know he died around 1323 BCE, likely from complications involving a broken leg, infection, and severe malaria, at approximately 19 years old, after a reign of only about 9 years, most of it guided by powerful regents like Ai and the military general Horemheb, both of whom would go on to become pharaohs themselves after his death. We know his tomb was hastily prepared, likely repurposed from a smaller, non-royal excavation, which is precisely why it stayed hidden and intact when the grand tombs of longer reigning pharaohs were stripped bare by robbers within centuries of their sealing. We know that today, his golden death mask and treasures are housed in the Grand Egyptian Museum near Cairo, open to the public in phases beginning in 2024, in the largest archaeological museum complex in the world, built specifically to finally display the complete Tutankhamun collection together in one place for the first time since 1922. Before we finish, comment below which fact in this documentary surprised you the most, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe if you want more real, evidence-based history like this. It genuinely helps this channel keep making these documentaries. What makes Tutankhamun's story so enduring isn't gold or curses. It's the very human, very documented reality underneath the myth. A sick child forced onto a throne he was never physically prepared to hold, surrounded by adults maneuvering for power, married to his own sister, mourning stillborn daughters, dead before 20, and buried in haste by people who likely never imagined his name, deliberately erased by his own successors, would become the single most famous name in ancient history 3,000 years later, because of the very obscurity meant to bury him forever. The sand that hid him for 3 millennia didn't curse anyone. It preserved the most complete, honest window we have ever had into what life, death, illness, family, labor, and power truly looked like in ancient Egypt, not the golden legend, but the real, documented human story underneath it.